Hi, fifth graders. Welcome to Social Studies class. This week, we are going to learn about daily life at the colonies. Our objectives during this lesson are to describe triangular trade, including goods exported and imported, to compare and contrast social classes in the colonies, and explain the impact of protectionism and mercantilism on colonial trade. The land, climate, and natural resources differed from one colony to another, which made living in each one unique. The environment affected the food colonists ate, clothing they made, and homes they built. Most colonies lived and worked on farms. They grew or made much of what they needed. They bartered with neighbors for some items. To barter means to trade one good or product for another. The colony's location, land, or resources helped shape jobs for other colonists. Colonists had to work long, hard days to make and provide all of the things that they needed to live. The middle colonies had deep rivers that made traveling and trading easier. Because of these, some cities became thriving ports. Many colonists in cities such as New York and Philadelphia worked as merchants and traders. Others worked as sailors or dock workers, or people who loaded and unloaded cargo from ships. People changed the land to suit their needs. As you can see in the two pictures here on this slide, the economy in some of the colonies was based mainly on farming, while others were based on the ocean, either trading or um, hunting for whales or fish. In this map, we can see how the 13 colonies were divided into three different regions, basically because of the different climate and soil that these regions had. The most successful region was the southern region represented in green on the map. Here, colonists were able to grow tobacco, indigo, wheat, rice, timber, and fish, while in the middle colonies, colonists' economy depended on cattle, iron, wheat, furs, and timber. And in New England, which had the least favorable climate and it had very rocky soil, colonists were only able to grow timber and then use furs, fish, and also build ships. And this is how their economy, or this is what the economy was based on. American colonists traded goods with other colonies. The colonies also traded with other countries, selling exports and buying imports. An export is a product sold to another country. An import is a product brought from another country. The colonies provided England with raw materials. These are resources that can be made into products. To control trade and protect its industries, England passed laws limiting trade between its colonies and other countries. This practice is known as protectionism. As a result, colonies had to rely on England for many necessities. Colonists felt that England was treating the colonies unfairly to increase England's profits from trade. The trade laws that England created were largely based on the system of mercantilism. This was an economic idea which suggested that government should limit imports but increase manufacturing and exports. A country would earn more money from products it sold to other countries than it spent buying products from other countries. Over time, colonial trade developed into a pattern known as triangular trade. It was called triangular because it had three stages that roughly formed the shape of a triangle when viewed on the map. Trade began in Europe. Goods such as metals and clothes were loaded onto ships. These ships sailed to the West African coast. There, the goods were exchanged for slaves. The enslaved people were then brought to the Americas where they were sold. Then the cycle started all over again. Europeans in the colonial society belonged to certain classes or society groups based on their wealth or importance. The gentry were the highest class in the colonial society. They were large landowners, wealthy merchants, and bankers. The men in this class felt it was their right to control others, so they usually served in the government or were church leaders. Next, we have the middle class. These had the largest number of colonists. These men and women worked in trades such as blacksmithing, silversmithing, and printing. They also worked as lawyers, doctors, or merchants who owned small stores. Most middle-class men were able to vote. Regular workers and servants made up the lower class. This group did not own property or businesses. Members of the lower class were not allowed to vote. A farmer working on a small farm or a worker on a fishing boat belonged to this class. Indentured servants and apprentices were also members of the lower class of society. Enslaved people were considered lower than these three classes of society. Every member of the family had tasks to do. Families worked and spent a lot of time together. Men worked on the farm. Women spun yarn, made clothes, prepared food for storage, and made soap and candles, along with the caring for the children in the family. Starting at an early age, most children had chores to complete. As children grew older, the chores became more demanding. About the age of 12, many children left their families to be trained in some type of trade. When their work was finished, colonial children made their toys out of things that they were not needed. Girls made their dolls out of corn husks, rags, scraps, or sometimes used carved dry apples as heads, while the boys used sticks as imaginary horses. Some children did go to school, although this was not the majority. Most of New England towns were required to have schools. If parents were able to read and write, then their children were often given lessons at home. Wealthy people would hire tutors for their children. Most children no longer received an education after about the age of 13 or 14, so that they could begin working full time to help support their families. Very few people went to college. In the country, workers had to perform many different types of tasks as part of their daily life. Artisans were specialized in a variety of skills such as blacksmithing, carpentry, wig making, and candle making. Artisans had skills that others didn't. These skills helped everyone else do what they needed to do. Artisans could make money for their families by producing the goods people in towns and farms wanted to buy but could not make on their own. As Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Charleston grew into large cities of trading centers, the need for people who had these special sets of skills grew. So this is how artisans came to sell their handmade items to the city. Religion was always important to colonial life. In the 1730s, a movement called the Great Awakening changed the way some people felt about religion. It began mainly in New England. Jonathan Edwards was an important figure during this movement. He felt that the colonists had lost their way with God and were not as committed to that relationship as they needed to be. So preachers like Edwards traveled from town to town, warning people against ignoring religion and its teachings. Another preacher, George Whitefield, had different ideas. He inspired people to have a stronger feeling towards God. During the time of the Great Awakening, different religious ideas were spread throughout the colonies. These movements weakened the power of church leaders. This because the main message during this period was that people should be able to develop their connection to God, which was far more important than following the church's belief. So with these, we close the video for this lesson. I hope this has been helpful and we will discuss further in class. Bye bye.